Are you forcing me to marry you, Your Grace? Why? The special license trembled in Clara Finch's hand like a leaf caught in wind. She stared at the elegant script, the official seals, the blank spaces waiting for signatures that would bind her life to a man she'd known for barely 3 months. Duke Alistair Morland stood by the window of his blue parlour, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension she couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and utterly devastating. We will be married by week's end. Clara's world tilted sideways. She'd come to Greymere Manor as a companion, a household secretary, someone useful but invisible. Now she held a document that would make her a duchess, and she had no idea why. Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this tale of unexpected proposals and hidden truths, I'd be grateful for a like or subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories of courage, dignity, and love that's earned rather than demanded. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been asked a question that changed everything? I read every note. 1. Clara's fingers tightened on the paper, creasing the expensive parchment. Are you forcing me to marry you, Your Grace? Her voice emerged steadier than she felt. Why? The question hung in the elegant room with its blue silk wallpaper and portraits of stern Morland ancestors. Through the closed door, Clara could hear the household moving, servants in corridors, children's laughter from the nursery upstairs, the normal rhythms of a great house. Everything ordinary while her life cracked apart. Duke Alistair Morland turned from the window. He was perhaps 42, tall and lean with dark hair graying at the temples. His wife had died 18 months ago, leaving him with grief he wore like an ill-fitting coat. Clara had watched him these past months, moving through his days with mechanical precision, a man performing the role of duke while forgetting how to be human. I'm not forcing you, he said quietly. I'm offering you protection. Protection from what? Alistair moved to the door and locked it, not with menace but with careful deliberation. The click of the bolt made Clara's heart hammer. From my cousin Garrick Sloane, Alistair said. And from my aunt, Lady Havisham. They've decided you're a problem that needs removing. Clara had known Garrick Sloane for exactly 6 weeks. He'd arrived at Greymere Manor after his own estate burned down, supposedly from faulty wiring. He was handsome in a polished way, charming when it suited him, and he watched the household accounts with the attention of a man calculating value. She'd also felt his eyes follow her through rooms. Had endured his comments about her elevated position as companion to the Duke's sister and secretary for household correspondence. Had noticed how he appeared in corridors where she walked alone. What have they said? Clara asked. That you're angling for the title. Alistair's voice was flat. That you've been seen in compromising situations. That you're using your position to manipulate your way into the family. The accusations were poison wrapped in silk. Clara had been hired 4 months ago when Alistair's widowed sister Beatrice fell ill with pneumonia. Beatrice had 3 young children who needed managing, and the household was drowning. Clara had excellent references, experience managing estates, and the practical competence of someone who'd earned her living since she was 16. She'd never been alone with the Duke except in the presence of his sister or the housekeeper. She'd never sought his attention. She'd simply done her work well, which apparently was crime enough. Last night, Alistair continued, you were in the library helping my niece Catherine with her Latin lessons. Garrick saw you. This morning he mentioned to my aunt that it was inappropriate for staff to be in the family wing after 9 o'clock. Clara remembered. Catherine, age 12, had been struggling with declensions. Clara had spent an hour helping her understand the pattern, both of them bent over the grammar book at the library table, completely absorbed in the work. It was perfectly innocent, Clara said. I know. But Garrick doesn't care about truth. He cares about leverage. Alistair moved closer, not touching her but standing near enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face. My aunt came to me this morning. She wants you dismissed immediately. Without references. She says keeping you here creates scandal. Clara felt her stomach drop. No references meant no future employment in any respectable household. It meant her younger brother Thomas losing his apprenticeship because she couldn't pay the fees. It meant poverty, the kind that ground women into nothing. "So you're offering marriage to save my reputation?" Clara's voice held an edge. "How chivalrous. I'm offering marriage because the alternative is watching them destroy you for the crime of competence." Alistair's control cracked slightly. "And because if you leave, Garrick wins." "Wins what?" Alistair was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Control of the estate. Or enough of it to matter." Clara stared at him. "Explain." "There's a contested portion of the estate. Land and mineral rights worth approximately £40,000. My late wife's family believes it should have reverted to them upon her death. Garrick is their agent in this. If he can prove I'm unfit, unstable, grief-stricken, making poor decisions, they can challenge my stewardship in court." Understanding dawned cold and clear. "And a scandal involving inappropriate behavior with household staff would prove instability." "Precisely. But a swift, decisive marriage." Alistair's voice turned harder. "That shows control. Judgment. A man taking charge of his household." Clara looked at the special license again. This wasn't romance. This was chess played with lives. "Why me?" she asked. "If you only need someone to marry for appearances, why choose the one person who can refuse?" It was the question that mattered most. Any number of suitable women would have accepted a duke's proposal, scandal or not. Why offer this protection to a companion with no family connections, no dowry, nothing to recommend her except competence? Alistair met her eyes, and something shifted in his expression. The careful control fell away, revealing raw honesty beneath. "Because you are the only person in this house who speaks to me like I'm human." The words landed between them, quiet and devastating. Clara remembered small moments she'd barely noticed at the time. Asking the Duke's opinion on hiring a new groom, then actually listening to his answer. Disagreeing with his decision to cancel the harvest festival because it felt too festive, pointing out that the tenants needed celebration more than aristocratic grief. Making him laugh once, accidentally, when she'd tried to mend a broken pen and only made it worse. She'd treated him like a person, not a title. And somehow that simple act had become extraordinary. "Your Grace," Clara started. A knock at the door interrupted her. Sharp. Authoritative. Then a voice, icy as winter. "Your Grace? Are you alone?" Lady Havisham. Alistair's aunt, the dowager who'd ruled this household for 3 decades before her nephew inherited. A woman who valued tradition, propriety, and control above all else. Clara and Alistair locked eyes. The moment crystallized with terrible clarity. If Lady Havisham found them alone in a locked room, the scandal Garrick had been manufacturing would become real. Immediate. Unavoidable. Alistair made a decision. He raised his voice, perfectly calm. "One moment, Aunt." He turned to Clara and whispered urgently, "Do you trust me?" "I don't know," Clara whispered back. "Then trust this. I will not let them destroy you. Whatever you decide about marriage, you have my protection. But if we're going to fight them, we fight together." Another knock, harder. "Alistair, open this door." Clara looked at the special license. At the Duke's face. At the locked door and the woman beyond it who would not show mercy. She thought of her brother Thomas, 14 years old and finally apprenticed to a solicitor after years of Clara working every position she could find to afford it. She thought of the small room she rented when she wasn't in service, the independence she'd fought for, the fragile respectability that was all she owned. She thought of Garrick Sloane's smile, calculating and cruel. And she thought of Alistair Morland's voice saying, "You speak to me like I'm human," as though that simple kindness was rare enough to be precious. "We need to talk," Clara said quietly. "Properly. With terms and conditions and honest answers." Relief flooded Alistair's face. "Agreed." He moved to unlock the door. Lady Havisham swept in, her grey silk dress rustling with indignation, her eyes sharp enough to cut. "What is the meaning of this?" She looked from Alistair to Clara, her gaze lingering on the paper in Clara's hand. "What are you doing alone with the staff?" "Clara is not staff," Alistair said clearly. "She is my fiancé. We were discussing wedding arrangements." The silence that followed could have swallowed stars. Lady Havisham's face went through a remarkable transformation: shock, fury, calculation, all masked behind aristocratic composure. "Your fiancé? How sudden?" "Not particularly." Alistair's voice carried absolute conviction. "We've been considering this for some time. The announcement will be made at this week's charitable committee meeting." Clara forced herself to breathe normally, to stand straight, to look like a woman who'd agreed to this instead of one who'd been cornered. Lady Havisham's eyes narrowed. "I see. How convenient. For everyone involved." The implication was clear. She didn't believe it. But she also couldn't openly challenge a duke's engagement without causing the very scandal she claimed to be preventing. "Indeed," Alistair said. "Now if you'll excuse us, we have details to finalize." Lady Havisham left, her displeasure a cold wind in her wake. The door closed. Clara and Alistair stood in the sudden quiet, both aware they'd just declared war. "The breakfast room," Alistair said. "In 10 minutes. We'll have privacy and propriety. We'll negotiate terms like civilized people." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She watched him leave, then looked down at the special license still clutched in her hand. The paper that would either save her life or ruin it. Outside the blue parlor window, autumn rain began to fall. 2. The breakfast room was smaller than the main dining hall, furnished with comfortable chairs and a table that seated 8. Morning light filtered through tall windows overlooking the kitchen garden. Clara arrived first, still holding the special license like evidence at a trial. Alistair entered moments later, carrying a leather portfolio. He'd changed his cravat, she noticed. Regained his ducal composure. But his eyes still held that raw honesty she'd seen in the blue parlor. "Sit, please," he said. "Let's be practical." Clara Saturday. Practical she could manage. Practical meant questions with answers, problems with solutions, marriage as a negotiation instead of a trap. "I need to understand what I'm agreeing to," she said. "Beyond the public story. What happens after the wedding? Where do I live? What are my actual responsibilities? And what happens if this arrangement fails?" Alistair opened the portfolio and withdrew several documents. "I've had my solicitor prepare a settlement. It's not finalized because I didn't presume your agreement, but the outline is clear." He spread papers across the table between them. Clara recognized legal language, property descriptions, financial terms. "You'll have your own household funds," Alistair said, pointing to a column of figures. "Not an allowance I can revoke, but independent accounts in your name. If the marriage ends, for any reason, you keep those funds plus a property in Bath that generates rental income." Clara stared at the numbers. They were generous. More than generous, they were insurance against destitution. "Your brother's apprenticeship fees will be paid in full for the remaining 3 years, Alistair continued. "That's not conditional on your remaining married to me. It's a guarantee." "Why?" The question escaped before Clara could stop it. "Because you shouldn't have to choose between your brother's future and your own safety. That's extortion, not marriage." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. She'd expected negotiation, but not this kind of fairness. "What about my duties?" she asked. "You said I'd have responsibilities. Estate correspondence, as you've been doing. Household accounts, which you manage better than my steward. The children's education and social schedule." Alistair met her eyes. "I'm not looking for a decorative wife who smiles at dinner parties and arranges flowers. I need a partner who can actually run this estate while I deal with Parliament and the legal challenges." That's unusually honest. "I'm done with pretty lies. They're exhausting." Clara almost smiled. Almost. The door opened without warning. Mr. Pritchard, the butler who'd served the Morland family for 30 years, entered with a tea service. He moved with the careful neutrality of staff who'd witnessed decades of drama and learned to show nothing. But Clara saw his eyes flick from her face to the Duke's, taking in the papers spread across the table, the tension humming between them like a plucked string. "Tea, Your Grace," Pritchard said blandly. "And Miss Finch." "Thank you, Pritchard." Alistair's voice held the faintest edge of humor. "That will be all." The butler departed, closing the door with exquisite discretion. Clara reached for the teapot to give her hand something to do. The silver was heavy, ornate, probably worth more than she'd earned in a year. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured. "Let me," Alistair said, moving closer. "I can manage." But the cup tilted dangerously, hot tea sloshing toward the rim. Alistair's hand shot out, steadying the cup before it could spill or shatter. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and solid. They both froze. It was nothing. A practical gesture. But the contact sent awareness shooting up Clara's arm, made her suddenly conscious of how close he stood, the faint scent of sandalwood and ink that clung to him, the way his breath caught slightly when his thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Clara pulled away carefully, setting the cup down with deliberate control. "Thank you," she managed. "You're welcome." Alistair's voice had gone rough. They returned to their seats with too much space between them now, the small intimacy making them both careful. Clara wrapped her hands around the teacup, anchoring herself. "You still haven't answered the real question." "Which one?" "Why me?" She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "The first answer about speaking to you like you're human, that's kind but insufficient. There are other women who could marry you, manage the estate, help with the legal battle. Women with family connections and impeccable reputations who wouldn't bring scandal. So why choose the one person who complicates everything?" Alistair was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because Garrick isn't just trying to take the contested land. He's maneuvering to be named my heir." Clara's breath stopped. "I have no sons," Alistair continued. "My nephew died with my wife in the accident that killed them both. The title can pass through the female line, but only if the succession is clear. Garrick is arguing that I'm unfit, too grief-stricken, too distracted, making poor decisions. If he can create enough scandal, enough evidence of instability, he can petition the Crown to declare me incapable of proper stewardship. And if that happens, he becomes regent of the estate until I'm judged recovered, or until I die. Either way, he controls Greymere and everything attached to it." Alistair's hands curled into fists on the table. "Including the tenants, the village, the people who depend on this estate for their livelihoods." Clara understood now. This wasn't just about property or money. It was about power and the lives it touched. "So marriage proves you're stable," she said slowly. "Decisive. In control. Yes. But more than that." Alistair leaned forward. "A scandal involving you specifically helps Garrick because you're close to the family. You work with the children. You manage correspondence. You're visible. If he can paint you as a scheming opportunist and me as a fool who fell for it, that's the perfect evidence of impaired judgment. But if I'm your wife, then the narrative changes. I haven't been manipulated. I've made a rational choice. The fact that you're not aristocratic actually helps, believe it or not. It shows independence of thought, not weakness to female scheming." Clara wanted to laugh at the twisted logic. "That's remarkably cynical." "That's remarkably accurate," Alistair corrected. "Society forgives powerful men almost anything if they maintain the appearance of control." "And what about me?" Clara asked quietly. "Do I get to be anything more than a chess piece in your family drama?" Alistair flinched. "You think that's all this is?" "I think you're offering me a very good deal to solve a very bad problem. I think you're being honorable about it, which is more than most men would be. But I also think you haven't told me whether you actually want to marry me, or if you're just willing to." The distinction mattered. Clara had spent her entire adult life being useful to people who didn't see her. She'd been a good companion, an excellent secretary, a reliable presence. But she'd never been chosen for herself, only for what she could provide. Alistair stood abruptly and moved to the window. Rain streaked the glass, turning the garden into watercolor smears of green and grey. "I don't know," he said finally. "Honest. Brutal. I don't know if I want marriage or if I'm just desperate for a solution that doesn't involve watching my cousin destroy everything. I don't know if what I feel when I'm around you is attraction or just relief that someone still treats me like a person. I don't know." He stopped, took a breath. "But I know this," he continued, turning to face her. "You deserve better than a marriage of convenience. You deserve someone who chooses you without conditions. And I can't promise to be that person because I don't know if I'm capable of it anymore. But I can promise honesty, respect, and time." "Time for what?" "To figure out if we're compatible beyond crisis management. To see if this could be more than a business arrangement." His voice softened. "You asked why I picked the one person who complicates everything. Maybe because you're the only person who makes me want to be uncomplicated." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away furiously. "That's too honest," she said. "You asked." "I did." Clara stood, smoothing her practical grey dress. "I have a condition of my own." "Name it." "You announced our engagement to your aunt. That makes it real, at least socially. But I won't marry in secret. I won't be hidden like something shameful. If we do this, we announce it properly. Publicly. In daylight, where everyone can see." Something shifted in Alistair's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. "The charitable committee meeting," he said. "Friday afternoon. Half the county will be there." "Perfect. Clara." He moved closer. "You understand what that means? The scrutiny, the gossip, the judgment. I've survived worse." She met his eyes. "And if we're going to fight your cousin, we fight openly. No secret engagements he can twist into scandal. No quiet arrangements he can use as evidence of shame. We do this properly, or not at all." Alistair smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look years younger. "Then we do it properly," he agreed. "In daylight." Outside the breakfast room, neither of them saw the shadow move away from the door. Garrick Sloane had heard enough. And he was smiling too. 3. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of relentless inevitability Clara associated with executioners and tax collectors. The charitable committee meeting convened in Greymere Manor's drawing room, a space designed to intimidate with its silk-draped walls, gilt-framed portraits, and furniture that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. 23 women gathered, ranging from village shopkeepers' wives to the highest aristocratic ladies in the county. They came ostensibly to discuss almshouse funding and winter relief efforts. Really, they came to gossip, evaluate social standing, and enforce the invisible rules that governed their world. Clara stood near the refreshment table, wearing her best dress, dark blue wool, well-made but clearly not expensive. She debated borrowing something finer from Beatrice, the Duke's sister, then rejected the idea. If she was going to be judged, let it be as herself. Lady Havisham presided from the central sofa like a queen holding court, her steely hair arranged in perfect ringlets, her black morning silk rustling with each precise movement. Around her clustered the most powerful matrons, Lady Ashford, Lady Penworth, Mrs. Thornhill Kent, all watching with eyes that missed nothing. Alistair entered precisely at 3 o'clock, as planned. The room quieted. He moved with the controlled grace of a man performing a role he'd perfected over decades, but Clara saw the tension in his shoulders. He stopped in the center of the room, commanding attention without effort. "Ladies," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "Before we begin today's agenda, I have an announcement." The room leaned forward collectively. Clara felt her heart hammer against her ribs. This was the moment. Public. Irreversible. "Miss Clara Finch has done me the honor of accepting my proposal of marriage." Alistair extended his hand toward her. Not beckoning, but offering. "We will wed before Christmas." 4-3 heartbeats, Nothing happened. Then chaos erupted in the form of well-bred whispers and hastily concealed shock. Clara moved to stand beside Alistair. Not behind him. Beside. The whispers intensified. She caught fragments. Household staff. Barely 3 months. Poor dear late Duchess. Unseemly haste. Lady Ashford's fan snapped shut with a sound like a gunshot. How unexpected, Your Grace. Delightfully unexpected, Alistair replied smoothly. Miss Finch has been managing household affairs with remarkable competence. It seemed foolish not to make the arrangement permanent. The word arrangement landed with calculated precision. Businesslike. Rational. Not the fevered passion that would suggest impaired judgment. Lady Havisham's smile could have frozen wine. How fortunate for everyone involved. One does wonder at the timing. The timing is perfect, Alistair said. We've had the opportunity to understand each other's character and capabilities. What more could one ask? Mrs. Ellery, a widow in her 60s who'd survived 3 husbands and society's judgment of each union, spoke up from the corner. Her voice was dry as desert sand but not unkind. Miss Finch, dear, come sit by me. You look like you might bolt, and that would be entertaining but unhelpful. Surprised laughter rippled through the room. Clara moved gratefully to the offered seat. Thank you, Mrs. Ellery, Clara said quietly. Don't thank me yet. You're about to be eviscerated with exquisite politeness. Mrs. Ellery patted Clara's hand. Steady yourself. And remember, they're jealous. Every unmarried daughter in the county just lost a duke. The meeting proceeded with surreal normalcy. They discussed almshouse funding, Clara took notes, as was her duty, and argued about the allocation of winter coal donations. But every eye kept sliding back to Clara, measuring, calculating, judging. Then Lady Penworth leaned forward with a smile like poisoned honey. Miss Finch, you must tell us about your family. We know so little about you. The trap was elegant. Clara had no family worth mentioning. An orphaned brother, a father who'd been a rural solicitor of no particular standing, a mother who'd died when Clara was 12. Nothing scandalous, but nothing impressive either. My family is small, Clara said evenly. My brother is apprenticed to a London solicitor. My parents have passed. How tragic. Lady Penworth's sympathy was performance. And where did you receive your education? From my father initially. Then through reading and practical experience. How resourceful. The word dripped condescension. Lady Ashford joined the attack. And your previous positions? Before coming to Greymere? Clara listed them: companion to an elderly widow in Bath, housekeeper for a country vicar, secretary to a minor baronet's estate manager. Respectable positions for working women. Nothing shameful. Nothing prestigious. She watched their faces calculate her worth and find her wanting. The door opened. A clerk entered carrying a leather satchel and moved to the steward, Mr. Pemberton, who stood near the account table. They conferred in whispers that grew increasingly agitated. Pemberton's face reddened. He approached Alistair and whispered urgently in his ear. Alistair frowned. Ladies, forgive the interruption. There's a minor accounting matter. I can address it, Clara said, rising. Every eye turned to her. She moved to the table where Pemberton had spread an invoice and ledger. The supplier's bill showed £300 for winter grain delivery. The household ledger showed payment of £200. The discrepancy was obvious, and so was Pemberton's discomfort. Clara scanned both documents quickly. Her father had trained her to read accounts before she could read poetry. She saw the error immediately. The invoice includes delivery charges that weren't in the original contract, Clara said clearly. Mr. Pemberton paid the contracted amount, which is correct. The supplier is attempting to add costs retroactively. She pointed to the contract date, then to the delivery schedule. The grain arrived 2 weeks late, which means we're actually owed a late penalty according to the terms here. Pemberton stared at her. Miss Finch, I I hadn't noticed. It's detailed work, Clara said. Easy to miss if you're managing other affairs. Shall I draft a letter to the supplier explaining our position? Please do. Clara sat at the writing desk and composed a brief, professional letter citing contract terms and requesting adjustment. She wrote with the same competence she brought to everything, unaware that she'd just performed a small miracle in front of the room's most critical audience. Mrs. Ellery began to applaud slowly. Well done, dear. Brains and beauty. What a refreshing combination. Several other women joined the applause, and Clara saw their expressions shift slightly. Not acceptance, that would take time, but a grudging acknowledgement that she possessed practical value beyond her appearance or birth. Alistair watched her with an expression Clara couldn't read. Something between surprise and satisfaction. Like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. But as the meeting concluded and guests began to depart, Clara noticed a newspaper on the side table. The cheap scandal sheet that circulated through the county, filled with gossip and innuendo. She picked it up. The headline made her blood turn cold. Duke ensnared, Greymere's eligible bachelor falls for household staff after mysterious late-night encounters. The article was vicious. It implied Clara had been seen entering the Duke's private rooms. That the engagement was the result of compromising situations. That the Duke, in his grief-weakened state, had been manipulated by a scheming adventuress. Every word was carefully constructed to avoid outright slander while destroying reputations. Clara looked up to find Garrick Sloane standing in the doorway, watching her read. He was immaculately dressed, his expression perfectly neutral except for the slight curve of his mouth. He began to applaud softly, mockingly. Excellent performance, Miss Finch, Garrick said. Though I wonder if even your talents with account books can calculate the cost of that particular headline. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. She'd been so focused on the committee meeting, on proving herself to society, that she'd forgotten Garrick wasn't just watching. He was orchestrating. Alistair appeared at her side, his face carved from fury. Garrick. Leave. Now. Of course, cousin. Garrick sketched an ironic bow. I was just congratulating your fiancée on her accounting skills. So impressive. Almost as impressive as her timing. He left, and the threat hung in the air like smoke. Clara handed Alistair the newspaper. Watched his face as he read. Saw rage and shame war in his expression. He planted this, Alistair said quietly. The timing is perfect. Right after a public announcement that makes us look defensive. Yes. Clara's voice was steady, though her hands weren't. And he's just getting started. 4. The scandal sheet was only the beginning. Over the next 3 days, the attack intensified with surgical precision. A letter arrived at Greymere Manor addressed to Alistair from the bishop's office, expressing concern about the hasty nature of the engagement and requesting a meeting to discuss propriety and pastoral guidance. The implication was clear. People in power were questioning the Duke's judgment. Then Clara's brother Thomas received a letter from his apprenticeship sponsor. The man had reconsidered his commitment and would be terminating the arrangement at the end of the month. No explanation. No warning. Just a door slamming shut on a 14-year-old boy's future. Clara sat in her small room reading Thomas's panicked letter, her hands shaking with fury. She knew exactly who'd arranged this. Garrick had connections in London. One conversation with the right person, a hint that Clara was connected to scandal, a suggestion that supporting her family might prove awkward. That's how power worked. Not with violence, but with signatures and closed doors. A knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Alistair entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. I know about Thomas, he said. Beatrice told me. She intercepted the post. Then you know Garrick is targeting my family. Clara's voice was flat. Not just my reputation. Everyone connected to me. Alistair sat on the room's single chair, a gesture of unusual informality. I have evidence. One of the maids came forward. She overheard Garrick meeting with a man from the scandal sheet, paying him to print specific stories. And the steward's office was broken into last week, nothing valuable taken, but correspondence files were disturbed. Clara felt cold settle in her bones. He's looking for ammunition. Anything he can twist. I'm going to confront him. Publicly. Expose the manipulation. No. Clara stood abruptly. That's exactly what he wants. A public fight makes you look unstable. Vindictive. It proves his argument that you're not fit to manage the estate. Then what do you suggest? Let him destroy you systematically? Clara moved to the window. Outside, autumn had deepened toward winter. The gardens looked grey and sleeping. I suggest, she said quietly, that I end the engagement. Silence fell like a curtain. No. Alistair's voice was hard. Listen to me. Clara turned to face him. Garrick's leverage disappears if I'm not part of the picture. The scandal fades. Your reputation recovers. And my brother. I'll find another way to help Thomas. I always have. By sacrificing yourself. By being practical. Clara moved closer. I'm not afraid of being poor. I've been poor. I've survived it. But I am afraid of being the crack Garrick prize open to break your entire estate. The tenants, the villagers, your nieces and nephews, they all depend on you. I won't be the reason they suffer. Alistair stood, and for a moment Clara thought he might actually shake her. Instead, he gripped her shoulders gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you know what you're doing? His voice was raw. You're proving exactly what I told my aunt. That you're the most capable, selfless person in this household. That marrying you is the sanest decision I've made in years. And you're walking away from it. Because staying destroys you. Staying saves me. Alistair's grip tightened. Don't you see? Garrick wins if you leave. He wins because I lose the one person who actually helps me remember why I'm fighting. The one person who treats me like I'm human instead of a title to be manipulated. Clara felt tears threaten. She blinked them away. I'm writing the letter tonight. I'll say the engagement was premature. That we both realized we aren't suited. It'll be gracious and final. Clara, please don't make this harder. Her voice cracked. Let me do this one decent thing. She pulled away from his grip and moved to her small writing desk. The letter wrote itself in her mind, regret, gratitude, a clean break that would let them both salvage something. Alistair stood watching her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, I'm not giving up. He left before she could respond. Clara sat at the desk as evening darkened into night, writing and rewriting the letter until the words blurred together. By midnight, she had a final version, dignified, honest, and utterly heartbreaking. She sealed it with wax, addressed it to Alistair, and set it on the desk. Then she packed her single bag. Her few dresses. The small prayer book her mother had given her. Thomas's letters. Everything she owned fit into one worn leather case. She would leave at dawn. Quietly. Before the household woke. Before Garrick could claim another victory. Before she had to see Alistair's face and lose her resolve entirely. But at 4 a.m, Clara woke to find Mr. Pritchard standing in her doorway with a lamp, his elderly face grave. Miss Finch. His Grace requests you come to the stables immediately. Why? He didn't say. But he asked me to give you this. Pritchard handed her an envelope. Inside was a single sentence in Alistair's handwriting. Please give me the chance to tell you the whole truth before you leave. Clara dressed quickly and followed Pritchard through the sleeping house. The stable yard was dark except for a single lantern. A carriage stood ready, horses stamping in the cold. And Alistair stood beside it, his coat unbuttoned, his cravat missing entirely, his hair dishevelled by wind. He looked nothing like a duke and everything like a man who'd stopped caring about appearances. He held the special license in his hand. You asked if I'm forcing you, Alistair said as Clara approached. I'm not. But I am begging you to stay long enough to hear the truth. All of it. Not the version I told myself I could live with. Clara stopped 5 feet away, her bag in her hand. I'm listening. Not here. He gestured to the carriage. There's a place I want to show you. If you're willing. Where? The village church. Public enough to stop rumors. Private enough for honesty. Clara should have refused. Should have climbed in the carriage and left immediately. But something in his face, raw, desperate, completely honest, made her nod. 1 hour, she said. Then I'm leaving regardless. 1 hour, Alistair agreed. They climbed into the carriage together as dawn broke cold and clear over Greymere. And Clara wondered if she was making the bravest decision of her life or the most foolish. Possibly both. 5. The village church of St. Catherine's stood on a small hill overlooking Greymere's main street, its stone walls grey in the early morning light. The building was modest but beautiful, with stained glass windows that would glow brilliant colours when the sun rose properly. Alistair helped Clara down from the carriage. The village was still sleeping, shops shuttered, streets empty except for a single milk cart rattling past. They had privacy without the danger of being truly alone. The church vestry was small and spare, furnished with a wooden table, 2 chairs, and shelves of parish records. Alistair lit a lamp against the dim morning light, then turned to face Clara. She set her bag on the floor. Waiting. You asked why I chose you, Alistair began. I gave you partial answers. True ones, but incomplete. Now I'll tell you the rest. He moved to the window overlooking the graveyard where neat headstones marked generations of village dead. My wife Eleanor died 18 months ago in a carriage accident. My nephew was with her. They were going to visit her family. His voice was steady but strained. I didn't love her. Not the way I should have. We married young because it was expected. She was suitable, I was available, and neither of us questioned whether we actually wanted each other. Clara felt her breath catch. We were cordial, Alistair continued. Sometimes even friendly. But there was no passion. No real partnership. Just 2 people performing marriage like a long dinner party where neither of us wanted to be rude enough to leave. He turned from the window. When she died, I felt guilty that I didn't grieve more. Ashamed that I felt almost relieved. And terrified that I'd become exactly what everyone expected, a clockwork duke going through motions until I stopped entirely. Then you arrived. His voice changed. And you treated my grief like it was human instead of shameful. You spoke to me about estate matters like my opinion actually mattered. You laughed once, quietly, when I tried to mend a broken pen and only made it worse. It was such a small thing. But it reminded me that life could still have warmth. Clara's throat felt tight. I don't want a marriage that cages either of us, Alistair said. I don't want to trap you with duty or force you with circumstance. I want. He stopped. Started again. I want a partner. Someone who challenges me. Someone who sees me as a person first and a title second. Someone who makes me want to be the man I should have been all along. He crossed the small room until he stood directly in front of her. So yes, marrying you protects us both from Garrick. Yes, it solves immediate problems. But Clara, that's not why I want to marry you. I want to marry you because somewhere between the account books and the negotiations and the midnight conversations, I fell in love with who you are. Your courage. Your honesty. Your refusal to shrink yourself to fit other people's expectations. Clara felt tears spill over. You don't know me well enough to love me. Then I'm in love with the beginning of knowing you. And I want the rest of our lives to keep learning. Society will never accept me. Some of society will. The people worth knowing. And the ones who don't. Alistair's voice hardened slightly. I've spent my life trying to please people who only valued me for what I could provide. I'm done. A life that looks perfect and feels empty is no life at all. Clara wiped her eyes roughly. I can't promise to be what you need. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. Time to build something real together. Partnership. Trust. Maybe love, if we're patient enough. He reached into his coat and withdrew the special license, now creased from carrying. I know the timing is terrible. I know Garrick is actively working against us. But I also know that if you leave, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Not because I'll lose a tactical advantage, but because I'll lose you. Clara looked at the license, at Alistair's face, at the choice before her. Run toward safety, or stay and fight for something that might be real. Before she could answer, the vestry door opened. The vicar, Reverend Hartwell, stood blinking in the doorway, clearly surprised to find his vestry occupied at dawn. Your Grace. Miss Finch. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, Alistair said. But I need your help with something. Today. The village is hosting the autumn harvest fete, correct? This afternoon, yes. Small gathering. Nothing elaborate. Perfect. Alistair turned to Clara. I'm going to do something that might be foolish or might be brilliant. I honestly can't tell anymore. But I want you to see it before you decide. 3 hours later, Clara stood at the edge of Greymere's village green watching preparations for the harvest fete. Stalls sold autumn vegetables, baked goods, and handmade crafts. Children ran between tables shrieking with joy. A small platform had been erected for speeches and announcements. The entire village had turned out, along with neighbors from surrounding estates, including Garrick Sloane, who watched from the edge of the crowd with calculating eyes. At precisely 3 o'clock, Alistair stepped onto the platform. The crowd quieted. Friends and neighbors, he began. Thank you for gathering today. Before we proceed with the fete, I have a matter to address publicly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of you may have read recent newspaper accounts suggesting impropriety involving myself and Miss Clara Finch. Those accounts suggest I've been manipulated, that my judgment is impaired, that my household is in disarray. The murmurs intensified. Clara felt every eye turn toward her. I'm here to tell you those accounts are fabrications, Alistair continued, his voice carrying clearly across the green. Paid for and distributed by my cousin Garrick Sloane as part of a campaign to undermine my stewardship of the estate. Shocked gasps. Garrick's face went pale, then red. I have documented evidence, Alistair said. Testimony from staff. Payment records. Correspondence proving coordination with the scandal sheet. This wasn't gossip, it was orchestrated character assassination. Garrick stepped forward. That's a damned lie. Is it? Alistair's voice cut like a blade. Then explain this. He held up a sheaf of papers. Receipts signed in your name. Letters from your solicitor discussing leverage and public opinion management. Statements from 3 witnesses who heard you bragging about your plans at the Royal Oak Tavern last week. The crowd turned to stare at Garrick. His carefully cultivated charm crumbled, revealing cold fury beneath. You think you can humiliate me publicly? Garrick's voice shook. You're finished, cousin. This proves nothing except your own paranoia. It proves you're willing to destroy innocent people for property you have no legal claim to. Alistair descended from the platform. And it shows everyone here exactly what kind of man seeks to control their lives and livelihoods. Mrs. Ellery, the elderly widow who'd been kind at the committee meeting, stepped forward. I believe His Grace. My own granddaughter was approached by a man offering to pay her to spread gossip about Miss Finch. We refused and reported it to the vicar. Other voices joined hers. The greengrocer whose daughter worked at Greymere Hall. The blacksmith who'd heard Garrick complaining about the Duke's weakness in the tavern. One by one, witnesses who'd been too afraid to speak found courage in numbers. Garrick saw the tide turning against him. His face twisted with rage, but he was cornered. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Alistair said quietly. It is. Your rooms will be cleared by evening. You're no longer welcome at Greymere. Garrick left, his departure marked by hostile stares and satisfied murmurs. The crowd began to disperse back to the fete, conversations buzzing. But Alistair remained on the platform, his attention solely on Clara. Miss Finch, he said, and his voice carried just far enough that those nearby could hear. "I need to say something publicly." Clara's heart hammered. "Your Grace. You never asked to be part of this family's drama. You came here to work, to help, to survive. And you've been systematically attacked for the crime of competence and kindness." He stepped down from the platform and moved to stand directly in front of her. "You deserve better. You deserve to be chosen without conditions, without scandal, without a cousin's machinations forcing the issue." The crowd had gone silent again, watching. "So I'm asking you now," Alistair said. "Not because I need a shield against Garrick. Not because it's tactically convenient. But because I choose you. The woman who questions my decisions. Who saves me from accounting errors. Who speaks to me like I'm human. Who makes me want to be better than the title I inherited." He held out the special license. "Clara Finch, will you marry me? Not to save my reputation or protect yourself. But because we could build something real together. Something honest. Something that might actually be happy." Clara looked at him standing before her, vulnerable and public and completely sincere. She looked at the villagers watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to warm approval. She looked at Mrs. Ellery, who nodded encouragingly. She thought about safety. About running. About protecting herself from risk. Then she thought about Alistair's voice saying, "You speak to me like I'm human," as though that simple kindness was revolutionary. "You're the worst sort of man, Your Grace," Clara said, loud enough for the nearest listeners to hear. Alistair's face fell. "Why?" "Because you make me brave." Clara took the license from his hand. "Yes. I'll marry you. But on my terms." Relief flooded his expression. "Name them." "My brother's apprenticeship continues regardless of whether this marriage works. I keep my position managing estate accounts and correspondence. I'm not decorative, I'm functional, and everyone will know it." Clara's voice strengthened. "And your aunt does not rule my worth." "Clear. Crystal clear." "Then yes. I choose you back." The crowd erupted in applause. Mrs. Ellery laughed with genuine delight. Reverend Hartwell appeared from the crowd grinning. "Well then," the vicar said. "Shall we discuss wedding arrangements? I believe St. Catherine's is available next month." "Actually," Alistair said, still holding Clara's gaze, "I was hoping for sooner. This week, perhaps." "Why wait?" Clara laughed, genuinely, helplessly laughed. "Because I need at least a week to prepare for becoming a duchess, you impossible man." 2 weeks then. Compromise. 2 weeks, Clara agreed. They married exactly 14 days later in St. Catherine's Church with the entire village attending. Lady Havisham came, her presence grudging but present. Mrs. Ellery served as Clara's witness and declared the whole thing the most sensible romance I've witnessed in 40 years. Thomas travelled from London for the ceremony, his apprenticeship secure and his sister finally, impossibly, a duchess. The wedding breakfast was held in Greymere's dining hall, and for the first time in 18 months, the house felt warm. Laughter echoed off stone walls. Children ran through corridors. Clara managed estate accounts from the study that had been her husband's and felt no shame in the work. Years later, when Thomas asked his sister how she'd ended up marrying a duke, Clara smiled and said simply, "He asked a question I couldn't ignore. Why you?" And I realized the answer was because I chose myself first. Everything else followed from there. Not a fairy tale. Not a dramatic rescue. Just 2 adults choosing honesty over convenience, partnership over performance, and building a life that felt real instead of looking perfect. And that, dear listeners, was more than enough.